Okay, so I've got those blocks inserted, and now I want to take this drawing into Photoshop. And this is really, I suppose, the important thing I wanted to show you. And again, maybe get you thinking about what you'll need to work in Photoshop to go with this drawing from AutoCAD. So, firstly, I'm just going to quickly set up a layout in AutoCAD by selecting one of the layouts I've made previously. I'll right-click there and go to Move or Copy. I'll choose Move to End, create a copy, click OK, and then I can simply rename that layout by double-clicking on it, and I'll call it Bathroom Plan. I'm going to double-click on my title block and change all those fields. Well, in fact, I'll just change a couple, so that's enough, and I'll fix the rest later. So, save the file, and then the most important step next is to then turn that into a PDF file, and that should be the way you always go from one program to another when you're working with CAD programs especially. So again, the main menu, print. If you get this option, choose continue to plot a single sheet, and then start with the Adobe PDF if you aren't sure, and if you don't have that though, you can always use DWG to PDF, it's very similar. So the other settings are already done because we've set them previously, but I'll just point out the main ones. The page size, really important that you set that to A3. What to plot should be on layout. Scale, always 1:1. And the plot style table, monochrome. So to save those settings, I'm going to click Apply to Layout. Then I'm going to click OK to actually make the file. Okay, so then I'll just leave the file name that it's given me, Combined Rooms, that's fine. Okay, so I'm going to save that, and you can see it's even opened up that in Photoshop. Actually, I've printed the wrong one, haven't I? Okay, so I did the title block but forgot to set the drawing, so that's okay, I'll do that now. Clicking on the paper button to go back to model space, and then I'll simply pan and zoom if you have to center that, and then change the scale back to 150. It's quite small on A3. I think it's actually something you should really look at doing on A4, but since it's been given to you in A3, we'll stick with that for now. And while I'm there, I might just adjust my title block. Okay, so back to print. Continue a single sheet again. I don't need to change any settings now because that's been done, so I can click OK and simply print over the file I've made previously. So it's probably good to see that because then you know how easy it is to overwrite a file that you've made previously to bring in your changes. So then in Photoshop, so I've got Photoshop open. On the File menu, I'm going to choose Open, and then go and find that file. As you can see there, I've just selected. So double click, and it'll come up with a dialog box with a lot of settings, but you don't need to change anything there. So just click OK. And what you should see is a page with a checkerboard background. That's correct. If you don't see that, there's a problem. So you need to see that checkerboard background. Do you know what the checkerboard means? Exactly. Spot on. That's right. Exactly. It means it's transparency. So yeah, so it's see-through, and that's exactly what we want. If it's not see-through, it means you have to cut out around your lines. So that's, I'm sure you've all done hand rendering in between lots of lines that are close together like this is really time consuming and quite difficult, and it's much easier using a computer because of that transparency option. So I'm going to then, so I'm going to save as on the main menu, File Save As, and call this something different. So I'll just call it Bathroom Plan, AutoCAD. Okay, so we'll set the page size properly later. If you're worried about the size of this, essentially all that's happened is that it's cropped it back to the part where the lines are, but it is still the right scale. So if we were to put this on an A3 page, it would look exactly the same as what we had in AutoCAD. So don't worry that it's cropped it. That's something that happens when you make a PDF file. So what I really wanted to show you though is how to get started with the rendering. You can see here I've got one layer. If you don't have the Layers panel open, you need to go to the Window menu and just make sure Layers is ticked. And then I'm going to click the New Layer button, which unfortunately on the projector is cut off, but it's basically at the bottom of that panel. I might just show you it's down here. But when it's maximised, you can see behind, when you're watching the recording you'll see it, but it's behind that monitor over there. So I'll maybe just bring that back so you can see if I click the New Layer button, it's going to make a new layer called Layer 2. I'm going to double click on that and I might call that Floor Render. Then Layer 1, I'll double click and I'll call that AutoCAD Lines. And then the really important thing is that I'm going to drag that AutoCAD Lines layer to the top. Your line work should always be on the top, and then you render underneath. So I'll go back to Floor Render now, maximize this, and start rendering my floor. So what I see a lot of people doing with Photoshop and maybe making it hard on themselves is trying to pick again in between all these lines for the different objects. And that's not how to render. The way you render something like this is to render the overall areas. So we've got this floor, which essentially goes to here. It's the timber floor. So I'm going to go up to, so I'll select that again. I'm going to zoom now. I'm zooming fairly quickly here, and I'm using a shortcut to do that. If you hold down the Alt key on the keyboard, then you can use the wheel to zoom. Otherwise, you have to use a shortcut, like Control plus or minus. That works. So holding down the Control key, using the minus and the plus keys on your keyboard, then we'll zoom in and out as well. But if you've got a mouse with a wheel, holding down Alt and zooming with the wheel is probably the easiest. So I'm going to click and drag again to get that area. And then I'm going to hold down Shift and then click and drag again to get another rectangle. Oops, I've gone too far there. Let's get that back. So that's just made the selection bigger. Now if you missed the tool I'm using to do that, it's this button over here. Make sure it's on rectangle. The button in the top right. No, sorry, top left. Okay, so I've got an area selected, and to fill that in with a colour is really simple. You can just go to the paint bucket tool, which is over on that toolbar on the left. It's often under the gradient tool that you'll find it. And then set a colour to the foreground. So down on that toolbar again, you'll see the colours. I'm not going to spend too long talking about how you set a colour. Hopefully you have an idea about that. And remember, it's RGB, red, green, blue, are your primaries, not red, yellow, blue. Does anyone still think red, yellow, blue are primaries? Yeah, you probably do. If you'd been drawing and painting, you would be thinking that way. That's natural because of the history of colour, but in computers you need to be precise, and red, green and blue are the primaries. So they're down here. But if you're not familiar with that, simply click on the colour area here or use the slider on the right. So I've set a colour, and now I can click into that area to fill it in. So that's the quick way of filling in or rendering an area. But you may want a texture, and that's a requirement with this assignment, that you do fill in some areas with textures. So I'm going to now go and open, under the file menu again, open. From the P drive, I'm going to go to Material Images, and then the Wood folder, and I'm going to get one of my favourite wood textures. I might change the view option there by right-clicking to large icon so that you can see it. And I'll actually right-click again and go to sort by name so that it's alphabetical. And then I'm going to go down to, again, cedar fence. There are two versions of it. One's a bit more colourful than the other. So I'm going to go for the less colourful one. Okay, so I want to put this texture into that area. Okay, so this is actually something, I'm amazed actually how often people who use Photoshop all the time don't know this simple technique, and that's how to make a pattern. So I'll start with the image as it is. I'm going to go to the Edit menu and then Define Pattern. It's one of those things that's been in Photoshop forever, but a lot of people, I'm amazed again, don't know this one. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yep. So again, Edit menu, Define Pattern, and then give it a name. So I'll just cedar fence. And now I'm going to switch back to my other file, and then under Edit, I'm going to go to Fill, change the contents there to Pattern, and then choose the pattern that I've just made. So if you go to another computer, you'll need to make the pattern again. I'm not going to show you how to move patterns, but it's easy to make them. So then click OK, and it's filled it in. So what's the problem? That's way too big. So, okay, so I need to make that smaller. Not that much, it's actually not as big as it would be in other cases. So I'm going to make it smaller though. So back under the, in that image file that I started with, I'm going to go to the image menu and then image size. And I want it maybe half the size it came in before. So I'll change that to, let's say 14. It was 26, so 14 is about half. A little bit bigger than half. And click OK. It's now smaller. Go back to Edit, Define Pattern again. Call it Seed Fence Small. Back to my bathroom file. Again, Edit, Fill. And this time I'll need to go to that pattern menu again and choose the new pattern. Click OK. There we are. So you can rotate the texture if you want to make a pattern at a different angle. You could always, well, no, yeah, just do that. So, so that's how easy it is. And you'll notice that I've rendered over the wall there. Don't worry about that because later you're going to render on a new layer. And I'm going to call this, I've just quickly made a new layer and I'll call that wall render. And then we can easily make a selection there. You can use magic wands, but you'll find when you have a lot of lines, magic wand takes forever to select. And here it's just easy to use rectangles. And then for now, just to keep it simple, I'll fill that in. In fact, I won't even fill, I'll just use the paint bucket and fill it with a colour. It's a stud work wall, so why not make it pink? That easy. So that's why you don't need to cut out around all of your materials, and I might just give you another quick example of that. So the bench there is a good example. Oh yes, so I'll show you that again. Oh yes, that's a good question. So how do I get that extra selection? Yeah, okay, so I'll select, so again I've got that rectangular marquee. So I'm just going to click and drag to select the first rectangle that I want. So it's just getting a bit, there we go. And then I'll hold down Shift, and then I can make another rectangle, and it'll just add that to the selection. So Shift in Photoshop adds, Alt removes, if you want to take away. So, yep. In Photoshop, you know, if you're not sure, it's one of those essential programs, and it's good to start learning all those shortcuts. Okay, so so again, now I can just quickly paint bucket that. Okay, so if I go back to the floor layer now, I can make a rectangle across that whole space. Okay, so then maybe I'll use Alt this time and make another rectangle over the area that I want to cut away, because I don't want to go over those floorboards. So I'm just going to use Alt to deselect that area. Okay, so I can render that area, but I need to get a tile pattern first. So I'll just do one more pattern. That's all I'm going to do for this video. So again, in that Material Images folder on the P drive, you'll find a stack of tiles. Let's get something pretty plain. Yeah, that'll do. So again, remember, edit, define pattern, tile 1, back to here, edit fill. There is a quicker way, but we'll just do it this way for now. And again, way too big. That's often good just to test it out until you know how to look at your image sizes. So visually, we can see that's probably 10 times too big, maybe. Or maybe I want to get fairly large tiles, so maybe it's 4 or 5 times too big. Say 4 times too big. So back to the tile image, go to image size from the image menu, and so a fifth of 36 is what's 7, let's say. So again, define pattern, and give it a name. Back to here, edit fill, choose the new pattern. There we are. Okay, so even if you miss some of those steps, you can always look at the video again. But more importantly, just wanted to give you an idea that you need to use textures. You've got a huge selection on the P drive that we've given you, but to get things that are more appropriate for your design, you might be better off looking for things online. And it's really easy to find those textures. You shouldn't need to make them. There's a huge resource of free textures that you can easily download. If you go to just Google, so I'll just do that and show you the keywords. So Google something like, if you want wood flooring, timber or wood flooring, seamless texture. So seamless texture is the keyword you can add to anything. Go to the Images tab, and you will get usually millions to choose from. Yep, tile, just seamless texture. So here, timber flooring, seamless texture, and you can see everything that's come up. That's right, bathroom tiles, or even just tiles. Tiles are nearly always seamless, but it doesn't hurt to put seamless texture in. And there we go. It just goes on and on. So before you even start any of that work, you can start collecting textures, download those images. Maybe I should show you how to do that. So I'll click on an image here that I like, go to View Image, right click, and then Save Picture As, and choose where you want it to go. So I'll put that, if you like that one, I'll put that into the same folder I've been using. and I'll leave the name that it's got. It's fine. So now I can use that straight away in Photoshop. I can open that, and there it is. Okay, so before I make the pattern, I know now how big I'd probably want that to be. I'm going to go to image size, make it 7 centimeters, and then define a pattern. Back to my bathroom, and I can then simply fill that with the new pattern. There we go. How easy is that? Okay, so I mean, if you can make a start on that this week, that would be great. But just as important, start thinking about the textures that you need and any other resources. You might have particular bathroom fixtures that you like, and so you can start getting information about those, the dimensions and the shape and everything else, and then putting it together. And really the only other thing we need to look at after this is how to then start adding some lighting and some shadow to these renders, which we'll do next week.